Good evening and thank you for joining us on the hot seat. Tonight we are tackling matters constitution and legal affairs in this country, and to do this, of course, we have one of the best legal minds in this country. He was one of those people who drafted the constitution, and I'm actually talking about lawyer Bobby Mkangi. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Very well, and
Thank you for joining us on the hot seat tonight.
Thank you for having me and for the flattering introduction.
Is it?
It is.
No, but you're
one of the best legal minds.
You're part of the people who drafted the constitution, so that means you're good.
Well, you know, technically echoing what Wanjiko, the people say, for me, I think doesn't make me one of the best legal minds. I pray that one day I will be, hopefully I will be able to join
you as one of them.
that pantheon of...
I like that.
Yes.
How's it going though?
We're doing well, considering, you know, it's a challenging climate, pandemic, and the ramifications that come with it. But we thank God that so far so good. He's been gracious, and we look forward to pushing on, you know, considering also the issues that we want to talk about, the constitutional, legal, and political, and otherwise issues in the country.
In the legal sector, generally?
Well, you could say within the fraternity or sorority itself. Yes. And especially with the institution that, professional institution that houses lawyers, we know that things are not very, very, very good. But again, it's in that process of growth, in the process of change. Definitely there's going to be a lot of friction. So in one way, it can be looked at as negatively, but in another way, it's within the progression.
Part of the growth.
Yes. When you look at the broader issues, and especially from a legal perspective, you're also seeing growth, because we've seen a lot of cases, lawyers going and arguing cases to do with the constitution, to do with the human rights of Kenyans. And so in that sense, we are becoming more of a country that is pegged upon the rule of law, and for that matter, centered around the constitution. And in that sense, probably we are achieving civility. So in as much as it seems to be, you know, friction and a lot of wrangling, I think to me these are very much within the processes and the stages that we must go through as a state and also as a nation, as we try to lay down and benchmark some of the issues and ways that we have to run our country and nation.
All right.
Yeah.
I like that. So there is hope for Kenyans. You need not to worry. He said it's part of the process.
It is part of the process.
All right. So before we go to all these serious issues, we've already seen Bob out there talking constitution, talking children's rights, talking different issues. But let's just get to hear a bit of you. Like, who's Bob? Where did you grow up? How was your childhood?
I had, I would say, a happy childhood. Maybe if I may start from there. Happy and privileged. And privileged in the sense that...
I like that. Not many Kenyans say that word.
But let me qualify what the privilege is.
Yes.
When you come to realize that you are living in a country and amongst brothers and sisters who, for instance, having 3 meals a day is a challenge. Just having 3 square meals a day is a challenge. And you probably did not go through that challenge. You have to consider yourself privileged.
Yes.
So privilege sometimes is subjective.
Yes.
And it depends with the context, because sometimes when we say privilege, we imagine big mansions and you know, big cars, etc. But when you come to consider that you're living in a society where just the basic emoluments of the day, you know, issues to do with health, issues to do with water, just having a clean and safe glass of water to drink. Issues to do with shelter, just having a roof that shelters you from the extremities of weather and climate. Just having good nutrition. And you come to discover that when you are growing up, the majority of children in this country, or your fellow children and fellow Kenyans, actually did not enjoy that. And it still is very much the case. So if you're a Kenyan who enjoys, relatively good health, is able to have 3 meals a day, and they don't have to be 8-coursed like in Buckingham Palace, or have a shelter, decent shelter, can get a glass of drinking water, you have to count yourself as privileged. And that's what I'm talking about, that even some of my classmates, because I went to school in Dr. Livingstone Primary School in Jerusalem Estate, and that's later that's in Eastlands, yeah. Yes. But I was born in Machakos, but started my schooling, standard 1, briefly in Machakos Primary School, but came to Dr. Livingstone. That's when I schooled until standard 8.
So ideally you grew up in Nairobi? Yes,
and then went to Starehe Boys Center. So even at Starehe, this Starehe Boys
Center. That's what they say. They say you don't mess with people.
Exactly. And so there you also, my brothers who are there, who came from very much less privileged situations, and, yes. and you come to discover that life is and was a challenge for very many.
So before we go to Starehe, yes. How was it for you growing up in Jerusalem back then? Of course, now it's...
That's why I was saying happy childhood, because despite those challenges, which actually you come to see when you reflect later in life, after you now start appreciating society.
Yes.
When we were children, you actually didn't see this.
You just lived.
We were happy, we played. When your classmate came with, shorts that probably had holes, shoes that were in disrepair, we actually did not see this as poverty, As I said, later in adulthood, that's when you reflect and say, wow, by the way, that is what now I've come to read in books as poverty and challenges, etc. But we were happy, we played football, we went hunting for, birds with our catapults, all those games that we and the space we had as children. And actually, when I consider how children are growing up nowadays and how we grew up during those times, safer, open ecosystems that allowed us to be, that's why I say it's a privilege. Nowadays, you look at our children, we've taken up all playing space, all playgrounds. Children are growing up in gated situations, communities, and not only spatially, but also mentally, how we are growing up our children is for them to be very much boxed. And their only way out is the screen, either a TV screen or a PlayStation or a phone. Yes, but I mean, there's still very many children out there in our rural areas and other parts of the country who perhaps are enjoying the freedom to grow as kids. But when you consider that we are becoming more urbanized, even when you go to rural environments and you see the process of urbanization in place, you discover that same boxing that is happening within the cities and major urban areas is also being replicated in the rural areas. Because I go there and sometimes I see my nephews and nieces, young kids, and whereas previously you would be free to run around kilometers away during the day. You go and disappear, come back in the evening, and parents wouldn't be very worried because it was safe. Nowadays, I see, even in the rural areas, a lot of control. Make sure you don't go beyond. Yeah. When you could go to the next village, there are restrictions around, such issues. So it's within that talk that I would say it was a privileged and happy childhood, in the sense that society sort of shielded us, children.
And it was everyone, literally.
Exactly.
And I know you're so passionate about children and children rights, but before we go to that, how was Starehe Boys, and how did you proceed from there? Which university? Was it the university or just...
Again, it was the University of Nairobi Parklands Law School. Starehe was an amazing experience. To be with boys and my brothers from all over the country, from all walks of life. For the first time, you come and actually meet the entire country. Boys from the farthest corners of the country. And so just that brotherhood and that society, in fact, you learn so much from that, from the background, the different backgrounds where people came from. I think even that was a bigger education beyond the classroom textbook education that we received. Just being able to be exposed to people from corners of the country, and sometimes even beyond. Places you only heard about, through media or textbooks, but you meet somebody who can vividly share their experiences about their villages and where they come from and the challenges and the happiness that they derive from there, and all those really enriched and made the experience even much better. And then also, one thing perhaps many people don't know about Starehe Boys Center, as it was then, and now in the process of recapturing, is that Dr. Griffin tried to give us a holistic, experience and education. I was attracted to Starehe Boys Center, one, my teachers and some of my relatives, because my parents were very much amenable and agreeable to some of the decisions I would make. And I remember my father did ask me that time, because you had to go and get those yellow forms you fill when you're going to Starehe. But he was interested. He asked me, why do you want to go to Starehe Boys Center? And this is the reason. I love football, and I loved football back then. And when I was in primary school, and especially, as I said, growing up in Jerusalem Eastlands, football was everything. Yeah. And so we used to follow secondary school football when we were in primary school. And those were the days when the likes of Kakamega High, Masi High School, in Nairobi, we had the likes of Jamu, of Afajerico. That's when it was dominating actually the country. But Starehe was there. Starehe, actually, I think in 1988 or 89, when I was in late primary, standard 8 or 7th standard 8, actually won the Nairobi provincial championship. Oh. And as it was then, schools that were known to be academically superior were not doing very well in sports. Yes, Lenana used to do very well in rugby in Nairobi school. But the equation used to be that you're either academically superior, and then sports and extracurricular, diminished, or vice versa. But for Starehe, it was all rounded. And I remember telling my dad, because I was following, he didn't know that we used to follow which school is doing well, how the provinces are, who qualified for the national championship and who won. And so for me, I looked at, because I wanted an academically superior school, but I also wanted one where football was serious. And the only one that offered that was Starehe. So I told my dad I want to go to Starehe because it does well in academics, but also in football. And he looked at me and thought, your priorities are very much. Because back then, thinking about sports and extracurricular. And I remember he's the one who filled my form and he put all these things to do with, yes, Starehe does well in discipline, etc. I didn't put my reason of football there. But when I went there, I discovered that was the case. Because when you look at Starehe, it has produced sports personalities of global recognition. Paul Ereng, 800 meters Olympic gold medalist, was in Starehe. Dr. Obwaka, one of the leading gynecologists, played for Harambee Stars, played for Gor Mahia and AFC Leopards. The likes of Saif Mtie, who played for Harambee Stars, for Utalii, was in Starehe. So anyway, so that actually is the environment that I grew up in. I was in the school first 11, and I'll tell you, it was a serious offense for you to miss soccer practice. If you get into a club, it wasn't a joke. You had to explain to the captain and even to Dr. Griffin why, if you are in the school soccer team, you are not going for soccer practice, or you're in the school band. So these were serious issues. So people think guys go to Starehe and just cram books. But when you join a club, you had to be very serious. You had to explain why you missed practice, why you're not attending, sessions, in as much as attendance of class and your books is serious. Yeah.
I like that. I like how passionate people who went to Starehe speak about these things. Then now you leave Starehe and join
the University of Nairobi.
And how was that experience? Did you only go to study law, or was it accidental?
A bit of it. Eventually I came to discover that might have been accidental, might have been peer pressure, might have been being disillusioned by what I really wanted, and the way it used to be framed that, you have to cocoon your life experiences, passions around a profession, and so when I weighed and looked at what I was passionate about, and the subjects I went through in high school, I think eventually law was the most suitable for me. Obviously, growing up, we entertained all these ideas about I would want to be a brain surgeon, I want to be a pilot, I want to be doctor, this and that, until you discover you can't stand blood. You want to be a pilot, but you are, friendship with physics is not very,
You're
on the opposite side. So all these things, and fortunately we had relatively good career guidance. So the closest for me at that time, and the people I was with, and the things we used to do, I remember we even started the law club then, myself and the likes of Tony Mochama, Smita.
Oh, yeah,
yes, he was my classmate, and the others. So we started law club. We had a debating club. We had very many, things and initiatives that we started. And so by the time we were doing our KCSE, we were geared towards, becoming the lawyers that we're also seeing on TV in shows like LA Law, reading and also watching, Perry Mason-based sort of legal adventures until when you go to law school.
And you discover.
And then you're exposed to the Kenyan legal world and discover that it's a whole different ball game, as they say.
It's not the TV.
It's not the TV law that you know. But University of Nairobi was also another very good experience. Again, you meet. I always appreciate the social aspects of learning. The people you meet, my brothers and my sisters, they infuse a lot of knowledge in the cross-pollination that happens in universities. However, I have to say one thing, that for me, at that time, university was sort of an anticlimax, because, we were taught also, you're told, soma kwa bidii, from primary school, you go to this school, then you go to university. So when I was going, and I had visited some of my relatives when I was in primary and secondary school. Sometimes I would visit some relatives in university, and back then university, and my late relative, Professor Mkangi, was also a lecturer at University of Nairobi, and so the few times you'd go and visit him and other relatives in Kenyatta University, the university was a very grand place.
Yeah.
When you go to the cafeterias, they would invite you over for meals, and to me it used to feel and look like it's a 5-star hotel. But by the time we're getting to University of Nairobi, in fact, it was the year, I think, after Boom had been cancelled. Help was coming in. Structural adjustment program was just checking in at that time. So funding for universities was almost zero. So universities were running on double intake. So you find rooms have 4 guys, some rooms even 6 people. So we got into university, I would say, at one of the lowest moments of university education in the country. So it was an anticlimax, just looking at the physical. I remember one time, one of our lecturers, Professor, a story used to be told, PLO Lumumba, I think they went to Switzerland, or I forget on what context, but I remember he used to tell us that they visited the prisons in Switzerland. And you'd say, I can tell you that the prison cells of those criminals are better than the rooms that university students sleep in. So you can see the condition. And so coming from Starehe, where things were very well organized and processes flowed, and getting to University of Nairobi, where we found facilities at really bottom, I would say that time. I remember the university bus. It was one. You remember it? It was the only one and only one. No window panes, nothing. I don't even think. I suspect it didn't even have some parts, but how it used to run. But it couldn't be stopped. No traffic police officer would dare stop that bus. And people would hang and cling onto, even on the carrier of the bus, because it was the only one and it had to ferry students from all the campuses, But no police officer would dare stop that bus. I remember one time we traveled all the way to Moi University in it, and by the time we were getting back there and getting back, we were all sick because of the window panes, But that was university. So that was part of the education also, that you learn also that life comes with its challenges and
aspects.
And so it's not only the positives that should educate you, but also the negatives. You learn how to navigate. So all in all, it was a beautiful experience.
It was a good experience.
Yes,
and
yes.
you managed to graduate with your degree.
Yes.
Join law school.
Yes.
Again, for practice purposes.
Yes. However, while there, that's when I discovered that I probably wasn't cut out for litigation when I was doing my clinicals, because I think it was at the end or mid-second year, you had to go and do what might be considered close to maybe internship now, and in other causes. So you would be attached to a court and a magistrate for 3 months. And I did my stint at Makadara Law Courts and Mrs. Kimingi. And I think during that experience, and I had dreadlocks. And I think during that experience, that's when I discovered that I probably was cut out to be, yes, a lawyer, but a different kind of lawyer, because I was also doing some work with children, helping my friend out in Mathare North, Area 4, who, again, was my classmate in Starehe, was once a street boy. So after finishing Form 4, he decided to start a center where he grew where he grew up in Mathare North Area 4 for children, for destitute children. And so he called me out to help him. So I would spend a lot of my time, when I was not in campus, I was in Mathare North Area 4. And that's when I got attracted to the direct service delivery of law, what the law I was being taught in class, how it applies to society, and the contrast of, so if we have all these laws that are supposed to make society right and proper and just and fair, so why are these children living this way? Why? And they are innocent. They never applied to be born. They never applied to be born under those circumstances, or to those parents, with all due respect to those parents. I actually always tell people that, in our society, we always talk about, we parents talk about ourselves as if our children are privileged to be born by us. Whereas to me, I think of it the other way around, because no child, sometimes I challenge some parents and tell them, if your kids had to apply, which parents would probably not have chosen you. So you look at it that way, and many people don't like it. Yeah. But those are the things now I started asking myself, why are children living like this?
So that's where now your passion for
children rights and social justice, and also now my understanding and my growth of what's the disconnect between the law and this. So where does the law come from? And that grew my appetite for now understanding even policy, geopolitical issues. As I was mentioning, that's a time when also structural adjustment programs were, hitting the country. And I could see firsthand, experience firsthand, right from what I was telling you at the University of Nairobi, how the experience many of us went through when people had to survive on ugalia, 5 bob and skumaza, and cook in your rooms, and how people made it. When you look at the times I look back and you just say it's by the grace of God. But yes, so those experiences made me feel that in as much as litigation work is very important, and we are seeing it now when lawyers, Kenyans, are actively going to court, using the law to go and rectify wrongs. Very honorable. But to me, I felt there was something deeper. What are the social foundations of law? What are the philosophical foundations of law? And that, for me, was more appetizing than the artisanal and applicable aspects of the law, say in a courtroom. And I think that's when I decided, when I was doing my clinicals, including the fact that within the 3 months, I saw very few cases, conclude. Even some which I came and found in process. I think it's only one that concluded in those 3 months. And I could see advocates coming to court just for adjournments, and if ever a witness was heard, it was one witness so I thought, and within the corridors, the grapevines, it used to be said that, at that time legal practice was knowing the magistrates. The good lawyers were those who could go and cut deals, and those were the successful ones. So I got disillusioned, but I also did understand that my interaction with the law was different, other than what was traditional litigation work back then. And my mentor that time, Mrs. Kimingi, actually, we had a good talk when I was finalizing, and she told me she also had those challenges when she was finishing a law degree. And that's actually the reason why she ended up in the bench, because she didn't want to do litigation, she didn't want to work in the corporate world. And so she thought she'd go join the bench for a while as she figured out, And so she also saw that I was going through the same, had the same dilemma. And so she told me, you know what, I advise you make your decision right now. And I think you're probably cut out for more. So you finish your degree and find out what you can. And unfortunately, after I finished my degree, I went and now joined sort of full-time my friend, George Awade, who was running the Madare Children's Center. That's what it was called in Madare North Area 4. And so when my colleagues were doing their pupillage, I decided to do my pupillage with children, yes, at the Children's Center. So for 1 full year, I volunteered. In other parts of the world, they call it finding yourself, you know, taking a break. That was my finding myself moment. And sort of, in a way, when I was finalizing that stint, the Children's Legal Action Network, a legal aid program for children, which had started as a voluntary outfit of lawyers getting together and offering pro bono services for children. The Swedish embassy then and the Royal Dutch embassy thought it was something viable, and they put together some monies to actually create a secretariat for it so that it could now programmatically and sustainably offer those services, allow those lawyers to offer those services to children. So because I was already a volunteer with the organization, when the first director, the late Eric Ogwang, set up shop, he actually asked me to go and help him do that. So we were the people, yes, we were the people who started the organizations and grew it. And so that fortunately now helped me apply my legal knowledge with children and also society as a whole. So eventually those merged together.
Great. So now from this aspect of social justice and kids and their rights to now fast forward to 2010. I think 2008 to 2010.
2008, yes.
Where we're in the process
Late,
of trying to get a new constitution as a country. And there's a committee of experts and names are here everywhere. There's the late Nzamba Kitonga. There's several people. I think Martha Karua was there.
Martha Karua was the justice minister.
Oh, she was?
Yes,
she was the justice.
Yeah.
And then now there's this lawyer with dreadlocks who's part of the experts.
Yes.
How was that?
Unbelievable story also. I got attracted to the COE for two reasons. One, when post-election violence started.
That's in
2007, late 2007. I used to live right along this road, Ngong Road, right opposite Uchumi, the Uchumi, Ngong Road Hyper, Uchumi Hyper. And because of its proximity on nearness to Kibra, and again, Orange House was very near. So we sort of, in that neighborhood, got to experience, I wouldn't say as much as other people, but the running battles between the youth from Kibra and security operatives along Gong Road. At night we'd hear the gunshots. Sometimes, just because I used to live along Kindaruma Road, which is the next street after Ngong Road. Those running battles, the youth running would come, either being chased from Orange House. So there would be, and the smell of, I think it's the first time actually, not even tear gas, even gunfire, you know. That's the first time. Because the police would shoot in the air, and at times now, as we know, they would actually shoot at people. And sometimes it would be very heavy gunfire that you'd smell it, even in the houses, in your homes. And you'd know that smells like, because from your experience with maybe fireworks, you know those are bullets, that must be gunfire. And that experience was quite vivid. And just going through and experiencing and seeing the injustice that happened at that time, and watching what was happening on TV. And to me, in fact, the point that I just said now, this is it. I mean, we've crossed the line was Kiambaa, the church. And when you read about and you see and you hear about actually even children, children. And I remember that's the moment I said, no, this is, regardless of what, we cannot get to the point where we are saying that it is so bad that somebody can ban a child. No. I mean, that crosses the line. The last time, I mean, when you look at such incidents, you read through history, even globally, such moments are treated with, very special attention. I don't want to get into that very much, but to me, I felt that, and actually, I felt that we were all sort of guilty as a nation. We were all culpable. We were all responsible in our own ways. I remember back then there wasn't social media as is right now, perhaps just a bit of it, or rather people weren't using it to spread. But I remember emails. You remember the group emails, and I remember the issues that would be discussed on those emails, and many of us, including myself, were actively, have you seen this email? Hey, spread the Constitution of Kenya 2010.
Yes.
So many of them. But when we won the confidence of Kenyans, and then the media also, we incorporated the media, because the media also became a very, very, very important team player when they decided, 10 years of writing a constitution, 15 or 20 years, depending on how long you look at it, we have to get this right, And so we are not going to allow ourselves to be played, to be used as pawns by the politicians. And so they stood with us, and we worked with them. So you remember even the truthometers,
Yes.
People remembering 2005 and the propaganda and setting it right. The media played a big role in that. Society was with us. In fact, I remember back then when the politicians would talk, people even call us and say, this and that, or the media. So what's the right position? So we became the legitimate steward of
this new constitution.
And so the people stood with us.
And we, as Kenyans, for real, we stood with you.
Yes.
2010 came, and we passed the constitution.
Yes.
11 years on.
Yes.
When you look back at the process that, as the committee of experts went through, and what is going on in the country, how does it make you feel now?
Sometimes it's very frustrating, considering where we could have been. I feel like it's been a lost opportunity. We could have been in better places had we been consistent, faithful to the promise we made to each other through the Constitution. But again, also, I think for many of us, for those of us who were in the process, and we knew the backroom situations, we knew where some of the decisions came from, we knew or know the players, and we knew it was the same politicians, whether in opposition or in government back then, who would form the ecosystem of growing the Constitution. We were still very cautious and skeptical about our optimism. It was very measured. I remember doing some talks immediately after the promulgation, and people would be very surprised. In fact, to tell you, I think I never attended any parties. There are so many parties thrown around for celebrating the new constitution. I think apart from a few settings, I really didn't, because I didn't think, funny enough, I never thought this was it. There was a sense in me that sort of told me, and I remember I kept on using the Swahili saying, kumzaa mwana si kazi, kumlea ndio kazi. And because I knew the same politicians, the ones 2010 to 2013, back then we thought the elections would be the end of 2012, it was still the same group of guys who we knew where they stood with the Constitution. Even the ones who eventually came to say yes, we knew it was a contextual yes. It was a very opportunistic yes, so to align themselves with wananchi.
But now, 11 years on, do you feel we've done well, or have politicians failed us?
I think politicians have failed us. The politicians have failed us. Probably we failed ourselves, because we also have to challenge ourselves as the agents. We say we the people in the Constitution. We say we are the ones who donate the authority to politicians. We are the ones who elect the politicians. So 2-3 cycles after within the 2010 implementation of the 2010 Constitution, we say we have Article 10 that talks about inclusivity, those very poetic, biblical, and Quranic and religious, aphoristic sounding words that we attach ourselves to. Under the Bill of Rights, we talk about non-discrimination. We talk about dignity. But when you get to the ballot box, you still just vote for your language and village. You see, so even us as wananchi, we have to ask ourselves, the guy I say represents me at the county level or at the national legislature or executive, both county and national. Why did I make that choice? We really have to question ourselves. Why did I vote for that man or that woman? Is it because of the principles and values that they stood with and advocated? Or is it because of the narrow parochial path of language and village, which if we closely examine the patterns of voting, 2013 and then 2017, and even now when you look at our politics, it's still around ethnic tribes, and there's no problem with that. But I think even if that is a primary focus, we should be able, or by now we should have been able to mature, and especially when you think of Kenya, the state of Kenya, being crafted within the imagination of what used to be called the nation states, from Europe. And the nation state, the nation of France is for the French, as it was. England is for the English. Scotland is for the Scots, you see. So Kenya, you come and the Mzungus come and carve out this plot of land for their development, and there are all these African people living there. They don't care which nations they come. So we have this, and it's unique because the foundation of the state, as they imagined, was nationalization. So now we are caught up in this fight of trying to nationalize. So which nation takes this state? But again, because we know that is a challenge, I think we can come up with the solutions, you see. But if we refuse and think that it can only be nationalized, meaning it's only one or two or certain nations that can play within this state, then we are lost. And that's why we are where we are. Yeah. And I think the challenge is for us voters, for Kenyans, the keepers of sovereignty, to go beyond that narrow path of village and language. Because if it's poverty, it attends to all of us equally.
Cuts across.
Exactly.
And for us to maybe get there, part of the institution that's supposed to help us get there also is the judiciary. Mm-hmm. And of course, recently we had what they called a constitutional moment when the judiciary said the BBI is unconstitutional. And of course, with that, there's a lot of questions going on because before that happens, there have been so many other things that have been declared unconstitutional. The president appointed parastatal heads in 2018. Just the other day, it's unconstitutional. The president, the BBI, unconstitutional.
Yes.
The CAS's Kenya Meat Commission.
Exactly.
But still, nothing has happened. Fine, the High Court will come and say it's unconstitutional, but it ends at that.
Yes.
So what are we doing to our constitution? And what is it that is the fight between the executive and the judiciary?
As I was saying, it's a sorry state of affairs because, and the challenge that retired Chief Justice David Maraga gave us the other day,
yes,
that if we continue like this, we'll end up being, what are called banana republics, basically failed states, because when we cannot live within the word that we ourselves, I make an agreement with you, but when I turn around or when I'm doing it, I know I'm actually conning you. I'm not going to be. So what sort of society are we creating? Why should I follow the law if the government or the president is not following the law? Honestly. And we are getting to that level, and we'll get to that level where people now will start questioning why the Constitution, and for that matter, sometimes people think, I read and hear people saying, oh, the Constitution has failed in this. The Constitution is nothing, the Constitution is paper and words. The Constitution is you and your actions, So those words cannot animate themselves. It's your actions that animate that Constitution. It's like the Bible or Quran. If you leave it on the table, you don't read it, and it's just a piece of paper, It's just another book. So is the Constitution. So I feel sometimes when people say the Constitution has failed in this way, it's like they are transferring their agency to that piece of paper or book. It is us to, so when we fail to agree, and as I was saying, coming back to that issue of when we are a society that is trying, and a nation, or we're actually in the process of trying to build a nation, because we come from all these smaller nations, but we are trying to build this super nation called Kenya. We're still in that process. We still don't have a nation called Kenya per se. We are in a nation building process. So we have to ask ourselves, because nation A, nation B, nation C, they all come from different and have their different cultures, different ways of doing things, different laws, different religions. So how do we create something that sort of fits us all? And that's where the Constitution comes in.
So has the president failed?
In regard to the issues that have been presented or as challenges to him within the law and the Constitution, and have been, the courts have found it to be so, yes. And for that matter, some of these issues, in fact, ended up in court. Not that anyone or people were silent about them. Some of us and many other commentators would caution and say, we think this is the wrong path. This is not within constitutional faithfulness. But the government or the president still pressed on, you see. So in that regard, yes, and the courts confirm this within the parameters of, because if I tell you, as I'm saying right now, it's my opinion, you see. Somebody makes commentary in a newspaper or on a TV screen, again, that's the opinion. But we have said that our equalizer is the law. And we have put down the law and a process of determining scientifically, forensically, that when Sarah says or does this, and somebody else thinks it's wrong. So how do we determine who is right? We go to this umpire to apply the law. That's the judiciary. And that's a system we've said we're going to use to scientifically and, as I said, forensically determine for us what is the right path. So in that sense, and with all these pronouncements from courts, and again, even within, as I was saying, the court of public opinion, this caution and warnings had been sounded out, but were not heeded. So in that sense, and I echo all the Kenyans and primarily the big voices of the retired Chief Justices, Dr. Willie Mutunga and David Maraga, in saying that if we continue within this path of ignoring the only thing that makes us a Kenyan nation, and that is the law, then we are treading a dangerous path towards unraveling the nation that we are trying to build and create.
And having the ex-Chief Justices, both Maraga and Mutunga, calling out the president, what does that mean for the new Chief Justice now, Martha Koome? Because now she's finding herself in a position, she's new in the job. There are things going on that, of course, everyone looks at and they're like, this is not right.
Yeah.
So what's next for her? What's her next role?
I think she did well and proper when she eventually came out.
And distanced herself.
Yes, but also said that this is the law. Yes. I mean, and especially regarding the appointment of the judges, she was very categorical. And I think she even said, and quite understandably, we can see that the framework of her office demands that she operates with a lot of restraint, caution, and in a very measured fashion. That is because, again, when you're a judge, you don't just go out spitting your opinions because sometimes some of those issues you're talking about may end up before you to determine, and if people consider you biased, then you're also killing the very institution that is supposed to deliver fairness and justice to people. So I think with the caution she gave that I probably have been quiet in my understanding around these issues because of my office and the call of my office, but I still have to say this has to happen. It is wrong that these 6 judges were not appointed, and they have to be appointed. That's the law. There's no other way.
And that's the law.
So I think she's in her very measured way actually echoed the voices of the retired Chief Justices. Yes.
So does this mean now, if we continue in this trend that we've seen, what next for the judiciary as a whole?
I think, and again, as I say, I think, and what Kenyans were waiting to see is what the Chief Justice, the incumbent Chief Justice, was going to do and say. And because the previous ones have been very strong and categorical around and about securing the independence of the institution, as has been designed in the Constitution, and for that matter, by Kenyans. And we can see Kenyans did take a lot of, or put a lot of energy in designing as an institution that was supposed to be very separate and independent, including giving it financial facilities for financial independence, knowing that I call it, I say that the open sesame to judicial decision independence is administrative independence. You play around with that, you have an open door eventually to the judicial decision making independence, and that is what needs to be guarded. But the first gate is ensuring that this is an institution that can administrate itself independently. Definitely there are accountability measures, and that's why you have a chief registrar who accounts to Parliament, to Kenyans, about how monies are spent. We also have accountability measures around the judicial decision-making, appeals, reviews, and also individual conduct of judicial officers. That's why we have disciplinary facilities if somebody feels that a judge has erred. So we must always ask ourselves, why did Kenyans do this? And I think that's what the retired Chief Justices were alive to. And especially in this transitional, because we are still transitioning. 11 years of implementing a new dispensation, and a transformative one like ours, after 50 years of behaving in a certain way, change does not come immediately, you see. So within the early stages, you have to be quite steadfast. As I say, you have to be quite, ngangari, You sleep a bit, the old habits, sleep in and crop, and you lose it. And so that's why I think the retired Chief Justices were very firm. And that's why it looks like, and for many Kenyans, and I think it's because of what we were used to, they think there is beef between the president or the executive and the judiciary. One, it's by design. We have a check and balance system, a separation of powers system, where the institutions of state are quite separate. But again, this check and balance is within the confines of the Constitution. People talk about interdependence. That interdependence is very much commanded by the Constitution, that the limits or the dependence between the judiciary and the legislature and the executive, and for that matter also now with the county facilities and the independent offices and the constitutional offices, all that is determined by the law. It is not personalized. It's not about PR and camaraderie. That's important, yes. But there is a reason why what the judiciary can do to the executive and vice versa, what the legislature can do to the judiciary and vice versa, and that holy trinity is defined in the law, and it cannot happen otherwise. So the presence of mind of the leadership of all these institutions needs to be alive to that. And that's why, because we are used to when the president says, even if the constitution, even within the former constitution, there are things that the president will do which were unconstitutional. but the president was Lord, you see. What the president does is constitutional.
The president one day during the campaign said they will revisit.
Yes.
So is this part of the revisit?
You cannot excuse that context. Yes, it is. To me, it is.
It is a revisit.
It's part of the revisit, because immediately after we, and I say, but again, you have to look at the context. Even when Dr. Willy Mutunga was at the helm, there was already friction, between the executive, and it's because the executive wanted, a toe in or a leg in, but the judiciary was firm. This is what Kenyans want. This is what the Constitution demands. And then Maraga takes over. And then, bam.
With the same, both ex-chief justices.
Yes.
Kenyans still are questioning why they are speaking now. While they were at the helm, they would have done things. There are things that didn't still. There were orders that were disobeyed when they were at the helm, and they did nothing.
Because I don't think they did nothing. For instance, within the call of office, they couldn't do much. But like we used to see Maraga actually now deciding to take extra measures and calling press conferences to explain matters, And it's because he had been frustrated, or the judiciary or the Judicial Service Commission, they had gotten to what Kenyans call mwisho wa lami, ama mwisho wa reli, And they felt that come out and speak. I remember once in a while, Chief Justice Willy Mutunga would tweet, and he would be cautioned, be told, you can't tweet about some of these issues. But I think it's in that frustration. And that's why when you listen to Maraga and when you look at the logical flaw of the Constitution, is that it's not that we have absence of what to do, but other institutions now check in. One, state organs. For instance, it's the legislature now, because the courts have pronounced, for instance, that the president has he has wronged or offended the Constitution in 1 or 2 or 3 things. So it's the legislature now that has powers, and powers given by Kenyans to now impeach.
That's what they're saying.
Yes, the president. That's a logical flaw.
But someone else will argue the same parliament you want to impeach the president, Maraga said should be dissolved. So are we...
It should be dissolved, but you see, it hasn't been dissolved. You see, it's an advisory he gave. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, it has lost public legitimacy and credibility in that sense. But technically, it is still the Parliament of Kenya. And that's why it has been executing, the functions that it does. But yes, it did lose public credibility and legitimacy with that advisory. But technically, it has not been dissolved. So it can still execute that function. But again, even beyond that, and it's something I've been thinking, that when we were crafting the Constitution, discussions around that were there, but not very much entertained, because it was thought, and the Constitution at times, as I was saying, it depends on the people to animate it. Because most of the times it actually calls bluffs, and that's why now the question is, okay, we have reached here, the president is not doing here, there are court orders, what do you do? You see, what do you do?
So as the committee of experts, from such discussions that you had and you foresaw such a happening, what was the solution? As I was saying, the imagination and the anticipation and the assumption, actually, and that's why I'm saying it's actually calling bluff, is that people will work and respect the Constitution. You understand what I'm saying? People will respect the Constitution. So is there a gap?
There's a gap between the reality of how we are animating the Constitution and the Constitution itself. And that's why I'm saying we are not faithful to it. But again, at the end of the day, if we are not faithful to it, we are not faithful to ourselves. We are not faithful to our nation. We are not faithful to our state.
In this state, now at this point, we have the AG, who's the legal advisor to the president. So what's his role? Has he failed? Because you can't be having all these pronouncements that the president did this wrong, it's unconstitutional, yet the Attorney General is supposed to be like a senior legal advisor. Advisor
to the government.
Yes.
And for that matter, in protection, because the president is head of government, in that formulation. And actually, for that matter, also protect of public interest, because the government we are a republic, you see. So, and again, this is the very old-fashioned way of thinking. Serikali ni ya hao watu. Serikali ni ya wananchi, but there's this thing, and as we are saying legal advisor to government, and also defending government is the one that represents government in court. So we have to ask ourselves, at the end of the day, when advice is given, who makes the final decision? The cliche is the buck stops with the president. So if the office is giving bad advice, bad legal advice, and is performing poorly in court, the court performance we can all examine, because we have the court records that we can go and look and see what arguments were placed forward, and that the public can decide. But in terms of the advice that is given when cabinet meets, because again, it's also collective responsibility. Some of these decisions are taken collectively. That's what the Constitution says. So it's a cabinet, the national executive as a whole, government, and the presidency itself. So we have to ask ourselves, is it low quality advice that is given and not taken, or taken, or is it good advice that's given but not taken, and the office instructed differently? So there are all these questions, and if the issue is that there is the bad quality advice or wrong and unconstitutional advice that is being given, then the cabinet, the national executive, and the president then should take action. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with the president.
All right. Before we conclude, something that's happened recently in the courts is that Kenyatta has gone back to the courts saying that the budget is again, it's gone beyond the limit, which was set by Parliament at 608 billion. So we've hit the limit, so there's no way we're getting that 3.6 trillion. What next? What if the courts say again it's not valid? Do we go back to the budget making process?
We'll see what the courts will instruct us.
Scenarios.
And again, because the budget, these are estimates and plans.
Yes.
It could be that anything that is in excess, that's 600 and so billion shillings, whatever plans were within that bracket, we forget about them. That's what is invalid. So whatever is pegged, spending is pegged within that figure has to be extinguished, and we readjust our spending to fit within the legally and constitutionally refined estimates. I think that's one thing, one way the court could go. And until that is rectified, then the government will be spending unconstitutionally. And again back to that point, you see.
So with all these quote-unquote unconstitutional issues going on, what's next for Kenya?
I think, for me, I still always go back within the formulation of, one, challenging us as wananchi. We throw hands in the air and say, these parliamentarians, we were the ones who elected them into office. Yes, they have been captured, but what can we do? What are you telling your local MP? What are you telling your local MCA about how or what they should represent you in those so-called august buildings and institutions? In fact, for me, I've been entertaining the thought that probably if there's one amendment now, and considering what has been happening to the Constitution, that I would probably very much support, is now introducing even recall facility, a direct recall, because where Parliament, like we are seeing, has failed to take action, just like with the amendment of the Constitution, where you can go through Parliament, but where Parliament fails or does not want, Mwananchi has a direct route through popular initiative. I think probably in the future now we should also consider that route, that Kenyans should be able to recall their president or even their national legislators, so that we have that extra sanction and caution, and we do not get to this situation where we feel hopeless and helpless. But I think now we need to, like Kwame Owino did the other day, call it as it is, start challenging our representatives. In fact, right now, I think the people we need to start focusing, isolating, are the MPs and demanding accountability individually in these decisions that have been made. Some of these decisions have actually been sanctioned by Parliament. Some of these appointments have been enabled by Parliament or endorsed by Parliament and politicians. We need to isolate these politicians individually, because most of the times also they hide under this or behind this veil and curtain of Parliament. But I think we need to start taking inventory of each, and from wherever they come from, start challenging them around some of these issues and the decisions they have made, directly or indirectly. I think we have been very proactive, but the situation actually demands more of us
that we do
as
better.
Kenyans. We do better, and we do much more.
All right, finally, as we close, your message to the President and the Judiciary.
It's one, there's a constitution. I don't think there's any other way. It's just fidelity to the constitution and the rule of law. That's the only thing that gels, technically gels what we call the nation of Kenya, because it's a nation that I am Mijikenda and Ribe and Kamba, you know, and those institutions or nations have been eventually called that or referred to as that because of common cultures and habits and rules that attach to those nations. So, and over a period of time. So we have to ask ourselves, so this nation that actually was created by the British, but I think we have said we are going to continue with the experiment in 1963 and also through 2010 Constitution. What are the habits and cultures and things that we are going to use to create this and continue building this nation? And it's the value system. It's the experiences that we want to share. And those are grounded upon the Constitution. So, because again, I'm not going to tell Kenyans that because I'm Ribe and Kamba, it is my culture that you have to follow so that Kenya becomes Kenya, you know. So we have to look for something else that grounds us. So for the president, for the judiciary, for legislators, and their employers, Kenyans, fidelity to the Constitution. This is the thing that's going to take us there. So in our different institutions, cultural, you know, in our churches, in our mosques, in our synagogues and temples, in our different ways of life, you know, in our schools, in our all these social, cultural institutions, which are very important, and those voices and opinions are also very important in supporting what we centralize within the Constitution. Those opinions, I think, should be louder. And we should, you know, now correct each other and guide each other towards what is right and correct. Otherwise, we are kidding each other that we have something called Kenya.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. I believe everyone watching today has had a master class of the law in Kenya.
I hope so.
Yeah. And of course, it was an amazing crash course, but at least we have grasped a thing or two.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Karibu sana. All right, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. Of course, I want to believe you learned a thing or two. If you have more questions, you can put them in the comments. We will forward them to the council and see how he gets to you, maybe on the socials. My name is Sarah Mwangi, and see you next Sunday, same time. Good night.